Game of Thrones is about to reach its epic conclusion, but if you're not one of those people who spent the better part of the last decade constantly rewatching the series for clues, you need a last-second reminder to catch you up, or you know nothing, including what that reference is, it's time to cram all of Game of Thrones into one handy video. Well, not all. Sorry, Miri Mazdoor fans and hot pie enthusiasts, some stuff had to get cut away. And yes, this is a long video, but hey, we're about to cram 7 seasons, 67 episodes, and a mythology denser than the hardback version of A Storm of Swords into less than an hour.
Maybe memorize every damn city, town, lake, forest, and mountain.
Cut us a break. Before we dive into all the quote-unquote present-day action, let's do a little bit of Game of Thrones 101. The entire show is largely set on a continent named Westeros, which is divided into several parts collectively referred to as the Seven Kingdoms. The weather's strange in Westeros. Summers last months or even years, but are followed by harsh winters, which bring darkness and misery. At the northern edge of Westeros is the Wall, a giant, wall, built to keep out all manner of supernatural creatures, primarily the thought to be extinct White Walkers, who can reanimate corpses to become undead whites. Also living north of the Wall are a group of uncivilized folk called wildlings. Down south is King's Landing, seat of power for the Seven Kingdoms and home to the royal family of Westeros. For centuries, a family called the Targaryens ruled the land, largely because they were able to conquer the kingdoms and keep power using dragons. Kind of like How to Train Your Dragon, but the realistic version of what people would do with destructive fire lizards. Over the years, though, the dragons slowly disappeared, and so did the Targaryens' power. The last Targaryen ruler was Aerys II, also known as the Mad King, who over the course of his reign lost his mind and became a radical tyrant who liked to burn people alive. The Targaryen dynasty came crashing down when Rhaegar Targaryen, Aerys' son, kidnapped a woman named Lyanna Stark of Winterfell, sister to Eddard Stark and betrothed of Robert Baratheon. Robert declared war on the Targaryens and killed Rhaegar in battle, but Lyanna also died during the conflict. Robert's rebellion ended with Mad King Aerys dead at the hand of Jaime Lannister, his own Kingsguard, and Robert on the throne as King of Westeros. The remaining Targaryens were hunted down and killed, save for Viserys and Daenerys, two of Aerys' children who fled east across the sea. Robert was power married to Cersei Lannister, daughter of the richest family in Westeros, and Eddard returned home to Winterfell to rule as Warden of the North, and things were relatively quiet, which is where the show Game of Thrones really begins. Okay, enough backstory.
What?
The series kicks off north of the Wall, where 3 members of the Night's Watch, sworn protectors of Westeros from everything beyond the Wall, have a run-in with a supernatural White Walker. A bit further south in Winterfell, we meet the rest of the Stark family, Eddard Ned Stark, who we know, his wife Catelyn, and their 5 children, Robb, Sansa, Arya, Bran, and Rickon. There's also Ned's bastard son, Jon Snow.
I'm not a Stark.
And Theon Greyjoy, the eldest living son of Lord Balon Greyjoy of the Iron Islands. Theon was taken as a hostage during his father's failed uprising against Westeros, and has been raised by Ned as his ward. Each of the Stark children also have their own pets, abnormally large wolves called direwolves. Ned's mentor, Jon Arryn, known as the Hand of the King, pretty much royal chief of staff, has died under semi-questionable circumstances. King Robert decides the job should be Ned Stark's, and he travels to Winterfell along with his wife, Cersei Lannister, Cersei's brother, Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer, and their brother, the hard-drinking, prostitute-loving dwarf, Tyrion Lannister, to make the arrangements. Once in Winterfell, Robert convinces Ned to take the gig by promising to marry his son Joffrey, next in line to the throne, to Ned's daughter Sansa. Also, loyalty, brotherhood, blah blah blah. Anyway, unfortunately, young Bran Stark, who loves climbing Winterfell's towers, spots Jaime and Cersei doing a little bit of incest. Bran is troubled, but he's even more troubled when Jaime pushes him off the tower to keep their secret.
The things I do for love.
Paralyzing him. Ned, Arya, and Sansa head south to King's Landing, while Jon heads north to join the Night's Watch. Jon quickly proves himself a strong fighter and befriends the heavy-set and cowardly Samwell Tarly.
I'm a coward.
Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, Jeor Mormont, takes a shine to Jon and makes him his personal steward, along with giving him his family's heirloom sword, made of highly prized and rare Valyrian steel. Back at Winterfell, recovering Bran Stark is attacked by a stranger armed with a dagger. Catelyn comes to believe the Lannisters are involved and heads to King's Landing to tell Ned.
I know they did it, Ned. The Lannisters in my bones, I know it.
Ned's already got his hands full dealing with the difficult king and the other members of King Robert's small council. They include Petyr Baelish, aka Littlefinger, the Master of Coin.
I've hoped to meet you for some time, Lord Stark.
The long-serving Grand Maester Pycelle.
How many years has it been?
Robert's younger brother, Renly Baratheon, and Lord Varys, a eunuch who runs the King's spy network. There are also all sorts of other colorful characters, including Joffrey's bodyguard, the Hound, real name Sandor Clegane, and his even more ferocious and massive brother named Gregor Clegane, aka the Mountain. They change actors later, we'll keep you updated. We also meet Sir Loras Tyrell, the Knight of the Flowers, who's actually Renly Baratheon's secret lover. Ooh, scandal. Catelyn arrives in the capital where she meets up with her childhood friend, Littlefinger.
How did you know I was coming to King's Landing?
He tells her that the dagger she found used to be his.
I lost this dagger.
To whom?
Tyrion Lannister.
Ned, meanwhile, discovers that King Robert has a number of bastard children stashed around the city, including Gendry, a local blacksmith's apprentice.
Find anything? King Robert's bastard son.
On her way back to Winterfell from the capital, Catelyn runs into Tyrion and has him arrested for what she believes is the attempted murder of her son. They head to Catelyn's sister Lysa Arryn's castle, known as the Eyrie, and then all 7 hells break loose. Tyrion demands a trial by combat, and a wily sellsword named Bronn agrees to be his champion.
You have that right.
Bronn wins the fight, and they leave. Ned is attacked in the street by Jaime, who then flees King's Landing. While recovering, Ned figures out the secret that Jon Arryn had discovered, and that presumably got him killed. Cersei's children are not actually Robert Baratheon's, but were fathered by her brother, Jaime.
Joffrey Baratheon.
It's the blonde hair.
Golden head.
That's the clue. It sounds like something King Robert would be furious about if he weren't mortally wounded during a hunt.
My fault.
He names Ned his regent and protector of the realm before he dies, but Cersei straight up ignores this and declares that her son Joffrey is the new king.
I wish to be crowned within the fortnight.
Robert's brother Renly declares himself the king of Westeros,
Give me an hour and I can put 100 swords at your command.
but Ned suggests that Renly's older brother Stannis would rightfully be the next in line.
Stannis is your older brother.
Ned refuses to swear loyalty to Joffrey and is arrested.
Your son has no claim to the throne.
Renly and Loras flee the capital and start assembling an army, and Cersei and the small council manipulate Sansa into writing to Robb and asking him to bend the knee to Joffrey.
Little dove, you must write to Lady Catelyn. And your brother, the eldest, what's his name?
Hoping to save his family, Ned makes a false confession and says Joffrey is the real, true king,
I come before you to confess my treason.
but Joffrey has him killed anyway.
Bring me his head.
Arya, in disguise, heads north to the Wall along with Robert's bastard Gendry. Robb Stark assembles an army loyal to the Starks from across the north, who all agree that they should declare independence from the Lannisters and King's Landing entirely.
Why shouldn't we rule ourselves again?
They declare Robb the king in the north and begin a war for independence and revenge. Robb proves himself a natural leader, winning multiple battles against the Lannisters and capturing Jaime to use as a hostage. In order to win these victories, Robb agrees to marry the daughter of a crusty old lord named Walder Frey
He has a number he thinks will be suitable.
in exchange for his army's passage over the bridge that his house controls. Remember this. Tywin Lannister, patriarch of the Lannister family, is none too happy with what's going on and begrudgingly sends Tyrion to King's Landing to serve as Hand of the King and get things in order. And that's pretty much it for season... Oh wait, that's right, there's a whole other continent in this show. Yep, we're going east to Essos, where we meet the 2 surviving children of the Mad King, Viserys and Daenerys Targaryen. Eager to retake what he sees as his family's rightful throne in Westeros, Viserys has arranged for his sister to marry the Horse Lord Aquaman, aka Khal Drogo, who commands an army of horse warriors named the Dothraki.
We go home with an army.
Daenerys is not happy about this, but doesn't really get a say in the matter. As a wedding gift, she receives 3 apparently petrified dragon eggs from the mysterious eastern land of Ashai. Serving as Daenerys' new advisor and protector is Jorah Mormont.
I served your father for many years. Gods be good, I hope to always serve the rightful king.
Jorah is also secretly spying on the Targaryens on behalf of Lord Varys and tips off King Robert that Daenerys is pregnant with a potential Targaryen heir. Viserys is unhappy that Daenerys is the one getting the royal treatment and threatens to kill her if Drogo doesn't take his army west now to recapture the Iron Throne.
I want the crown he promised me.
So Khal Drogo kills him with boiling gold. Daenerys takes it pretty well.
He was no dragon.
Jorah prevents an assassination attempt from Robert on Daenerys, which sells Drogo on the idea of invading Westeros. But during a fight, Drogo is wounded and dies. Daenerys and Jorah are abandoned by most of the Dothraki, and Daenerys loses her baby.
The boy did not live.
However, after walking into Drogo's funeral pyre with the dragon eggs, Daenerys emerges unharmed with 3 living baby dragons. And that is the end of season 1. It gets quicker from here, we promise. I just introduced like 50 people. Most of the second season is taken up with the War of the Five Kings, in which a bunch of different Westerosi families go to war over control of the Iron Throne. We can hopefully get through this pretty quickly because as of right now, all of these kings are either definitely dead or very likely dead. The first king to drop is Renly Baratheon, murdered by a shadow demon conjured by his older brother Stannis, a grim man who's also very grim. Stannis is able to do this with the help of the Red Woman Melisandre, a priestess for the Lord of Light, a god who gives visions to his followers in fire, requires sacrifices with fire, lights the swords of his warriors on fire. He's big into fire.
I have seen the path to victory in the flames.
Stannis' right-hand man is Davos Seaworth, a former smuggler who's not sure about this whole fire priestess thing. Brienne of Tarth, Renly's loyal Kingsguard, is blamed for his death.
You'll die for this!
No, wait, it wasn't her!
But flees his camp alongside Catelyn Stark, who had come to see about a potential Renly-Robb alliance. Eventually, Brienne swears fealty to Catelyn, who asks her to take Jaime Lannister back to King's Landing and exchange him for Arya and Sansa.
Killing Jaime Lannister would not buy life for your children. But returning him to King's Landing may buy life for mine.
Renly's now widow, Marjorie Tyrell, is, kind of sad, but really wants to keep climbing up that social ladder.
Do you want to be a queen?
No. I want to be the queen.
Robb Stark, meanwhile, falls in love with a nurse named Talisa. Remember that promise to marry one of Walder Frey's daughters? Yeah, that's out the window. Much like Bran. Back in King's Landing, Tyrion finally returns from his travels along with a woman named Shae, who, long story short, is a prostitute Tyrion falls in love with, whom he also ultimately kills with his bare hands. That is a whole other video. Anyway, as Hand of the King, Tyrion gets to work and formulates an alliance with the Martell family of Dorne.
I'm brokering an alliance with House Martell of Dorne
by sending Cersei's daughter, Myrcella, away to be married to one of their princes. Tyrion also discovers there's a stockpile of wildfire, which is kind of like magical supercharged napalm in the capital.
The substance burns so hot, it melts wood, stone, even steel.
Eventually, Stannis and his fleet attack King's Landing.
Come with me and take this city!
In what comes to be known as the Battle of the Blackwater. Tyrion and Bronn destroy Stannis' fleet with wildfire, but the army keeps on coming. The Hound, frightened of all these flames, abandons his position and leaves King's Landing.
the city. The king.
Tyrion and the Lannister soldiers manage to protect the castle, but not before Tyrion is brutally scarred in the battle. The rest of Stannis' force is wiped out when Tywin Lannister arrives, along with an additional army, courtesy of Marjorie's family, the powerful House Tyrell.
The battle is over. We have won.
Stannis retreats back to Dragonstone to be grim, where Melisandre convinces him to keep fighting.
This war has just begun.
Tyrion is relieved of his power.
You are no longer a Hand of the King.
And the Hand of the King position now goes to Tywin himself.
Thank you, Your Grace.
And by way of saying thanks for the army, Marjorie Tyrell is now betrothed to Joffrey, and Sansa is no longer in line to be married to the king. Okay, let's head up north to Winterfell, where Bran has been having strange dreams about a three-eyed raven and seeing through the eyes of his direwolf Summer. More on that later. In need of more soldiers, Robb Stark dispatches Theon back to the Iron Islands and his home of Pike to get his father Balon Greyjoy to join his cause.
I brought you a proposal from Robb Stark.
But Balon refuses and wants instead to attack the North while the Starks and their allies are focused on fighting the Lannisters. Theon flips allegiances and leads a band of raiders from House Greyjoy to take control of Winterfell.
I've taken your castle.
Bran and Rickon escape with former wildling Osha, and Stark's servant slash chauffeur slash mononym Hodor and head north to the Wall to meet up with Jon Snow. Roose Bolton of the Dreadfort, one of Robb's most powerful allies, offers to send his bastard son Ramsay to retake Winterfell.
Theon holds the castle with a skeleton crew.
Theon's men turn on him, abandon Winterfell, which is then burned, and give Theon over to the Bolton army. Even further north, several members of the Night's Watch go searching for the missing ranger Benjen Stark, who's Ned Stark's brother. At an ancient landmark called the Fist of the First Men, they find a cache of weapons made of a substance called dragon glass. These will be very important later. Jon Snow gets separated from the other rangers, meets up with a wildling named Ygritte, and becomes a spy for the Night's Watch embedded with the army of Mance Rayder, the king beyond the Wall. Oh, and let's not forget Arya. While traveling north out of King's Landing and toward the Wall, she meets up with a man named Jaqen H'ghar, who's being held prisoner.
A man has a thirst. A boy could make a friend.
Yeah, he always talks funny like that. The Lannisters catch up with the party, kill Arya's friend, take her sword Needle, and take the entire group to the Lannister-held Harrenhal. In the process, Arya saves Jaqen's life. Jaqen, appreciative of Arya's help, agrees to kill 3 people for her as a make-good.
A man pays his debts. A man owes 3.
And he ultimately helps Arya and Gendry escape Harrenhal.
The girl and her friends will walk through the gate at midnight.
Jaqen offers to take Arya with him to the free city of Braavos and teach her to be an assassin like him. But Arya doesn't want to abandon her family, so he gives her an iron coin that she can use later to find him. And as Jaqen H'ghar leaves, he reveals that he can magically change his appearance. He doesn't even need one of those Mission Impossible masks. That's a real time saver. On the other side of the world, Daenerys, abandoned by Drogo's men and near death, finds her way to the city of Qarth. A wealthy merchant and a warlock there plot to steal her dragons, but she takes them out and manages to get away with enough valuables to buy a ship. Yeah, that's pretty much Daenerys in Season 2. A lot of Season 3 takes place way up north in Castle Black and beyond, so let's start with the Night's Watch. Jon Snow makes it to the wildling camp and meets Tormund Giantsbane and King Beyond the Wall Mance Rayder. He convinces them that he's sincere about joining their cause.
We'll need to find you a new cloak.
Mance sends Tormund, Jon, Ygritte, and some others on a perilous mission to climb over the wall and then wait to attack Castle Black from the other side, where they're less defended. On their way to the wall, Jon and Ygritte fall in love and do it in a cave. But once they're over the wall, Jon refuses to kill an old man who helps supply the Night's Watch with horses, so the wildlings figure out that he's not really on their side after all. They try to kill him, even Ygritte.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
But he escapes. On the other side of the wall, Sam falls in love with a woman named Gilly at the worst Airbnb in Westeros, Craster's Keep. The other Night's Watch brothers grow tired of Craster's lack of hospitality and kill him. Commander Mormont dies in the scuffle, and Sam and Gilly run away. On their way back to the wall, Sam manages to kill a White Walker with a dagger made of dragon glass. They eventually make it back to Castle Black and warn everyone that the White Walkers have returned. Meanwhile, Bran Stark and his company meet up with 2 teens from House Reed, Jojen and Mira. The Reeds want to take Bran north to find the 3-eyed raven from his dreams. Jojen tells Bran that he's a warg, meaning he can see through the eyes of animals and control them.
You can get inside his head, see through his eyes.
And Bran has the sight, allowing him to see things that are happening far away, things that haven't happened yet, or things that happened in the past. Bran sends his brother and Osha away and decides to venture beyond the wall to find the Raven. Arya Stark is still on the run with Gendry when they cross paths with a group calling themselves the Brotherhood Without Banners. It's run by Beric Dondarrion, the knight who was sent way back in Season 1 by Ned Stark to track down the mountain. Beric Dondarrion is now loyal to no house and is in league with another priest for the Lord of Light, a drunk named Thoros of Myr. Purely by coincidence, the Brotherhood also has the Hound captive, and they put him on trial for murder.
I sentence you to trial by combat.
So he and Beric Dondarrion have a sword fight. The Hound wins, killing Beric in the process, but Thoros brings him back to life using the Lord of Light's magic. So the Hound decides to take off. Melisandre then locates the group and takes Gendry so she can sacrifice him and his Baratheon king's blood to the Lord of Light to aid Stannis' cause. Arya takes the chance to run away from the Brotherhood but is captured by the Hound, who's been waiting for her and plans to take her back to her family for a ransom. Theon, meanwhile, is being tortured for fun by Roose Bolton's sadistic, cruel bastard, Ramsay Snow. This torture includes cutting off Theon's pike. Broken by his captor, Theon now agrees to be Ramsay's pet with a new name, Reek. And speaking of House Bolton, one of their bannermen, a guy named Locke, intercepts Jaime and Brienne,
Blade man of House Bolton,
and takes them captive. He chops off Jaime's right hand as a show of strength. Once they arrive at Harrenhal Castle, Jaime's injury is treated by a disgraced former maester named Qyburn, who lost his position for conducting illegal and questionable experiments on people. Roose Bolton agrees to send Jaime to King's Landing, where he promises Brienne that he will have the Stark daughters released as Catelyn Stark wished. Stannis Baratheon spends this entire season in his castle at Dragonstone, grimly brooding about his loss at the Blackwater. When Sir Davos finds out about Melisandre's plan to sacrifice Gendry, he frees the boy and tells him to head for King's Landing in a rowboat, a trip that will take at least a couple of seasons. In King's Landing, Joffrey is now enjoying his engagement to Margaery Tyrell, which is really both a step up and a step down for her. Sansa tells Olenna Tyrell, the powerful matriarch of the wealthy Tyrell family, the truth about King Joffrey.
He's a monster.
But the wedding plans continue anyway. Tywin Lannister decides to lock up the whole damn realm and orders that Tyrion be married to Sansa to secure the north, and Cersei be married to Loras Tyrell to secure the south. Neither one of them is happy with this arrangement. And finally in Westeros, there's Robb Stark and his army. They're starting to lose the war through attrition and a loss of morale.
don't have enough to make a difference.
Have you lost faith in our cause?
To secure the men he needs to keep fighting, he has to make good with the man he double-crossed, Walder Frey.
I have come to make my apologies, my lord.
They come to an agreement. Catelyn's brother, Edmure Tully, will marry Walder's daughter Rosalind, and the Freys will receive Harrenhal as further compensation. En route to Edmure's wedding, Talisa reveals to Robb that she's pregnant, but their happiness is short-lived. Because as it turns out, Roose Bolton and Tywin Lannister have been up to something. Immediately after the wedding ceremony and Robb's public apology to Walder Frey, he's betrayed by both the Freys and Boltons.
The Lannisters send their regards.
Talisa, Robb, and Catelyn are all murdered, along with most of their soldiers, and even Robb's direwolf, Grey Wind. For his participation in what comes to be known as the Red Wedding, Roose Bolton becomes Warden of the North, friend of the Lannisters, and architect of the most shocking moment in Game of Thrones history so far. And finally, we go east to Essos. Daenerys uses the money she stole from Qarth to travel to the slave city of Astapor. She promises to trade one of her dragons in exchange for a slave army known as the Unsullied. But the dragon has different ideas and burns the army's owner alive. Daenerys frees the slaves and now has the Unsullied as a willing private army led by the soldier Grey Worm. She also recruits a formerly enslaved translator, Missandei, to join the cause. Daenerys and the Unsullied now advance to a city called Yunkai, intending to free the slaves there as well. See, Daenerys' mission is kind of shifted from just conquering Westeros to also ridding the world of slavery, because you have to dream big. Yunkai is protected by a mercenary group called the Second Sons, but one of them, Daario Naharis, is so impressed by Daenerys' beauty that he turns on his leaders, kills the men who were sent to assassinate Daenerys, and brings the Second Sons into her army. They change actors later, we'll keep you updated. Ser Jorah, Daario, and Grey Worm go on a daring raid to secure Yunkai.
The city is yours, my queen.
After which the city's freed slaves embrace Daenerys as Misa, meaning mother. As Season 4 begins, we turn our attention back to King's Landing, where planning for King Joffrey's wedding to Margaery Tyrell is deep underway. Among the guests is Prince Oberyn Martell of Dorne, brother of Rhaegar Targaryen's wife, Elia. He wants revenge against the Lannisters in the Mountain for the rape and murder of his sister, and the murders of her children in the aftermath of Robert's Rebellion. At Joffrey's wedding, he drinks some poisoned wine and dies. Usually the death of a child is a tragedy, but you know what? I'll give this one a pass. Cersei assumes Tyrion and his wife Sansa must have been behind it.
You did this! You did this!
We have to leave.
Take him!
And orders them both arrested. Sansa manages to get away and out of King's Landing with some help from Littlefinger, who was working with the mastermind of Joffrey's murder, Marjorie's grandmother, Lady Olenna.
You don't think I'd let you marry that beast, do you?
Littlefinger vows to keep Sansa safe and takes her with him to the Vale, where he marries her aunt Lysa Arryn. And a season 1 mystery is solved as we discover that Littlefinger told Lysa to kill her husband, Jon Arryn, so they could be together, and then send a letter to the Starks blaming it on the Lannisters.
You gave me those drops and told me to pour them into Jon's wine.
So in a way, Littlefinger is really the mastermind behind almost everything that's happened in Westeros so far. Anyway, now that he's power married with a firm grip on the Vale, Lysa Arryn has served her purpose, so Littlefinger pushes her out of the moon door. Back in King's Landing, Jaime, who has a new golden hand, tasks Brienne with finding Sansa.
I swore by all the gods that if her daughters were alive, I'd return them to her.
He gives Brienne Oathkeeper, a Valyrian steel sword Tywin created by melting down Ned Stark's sword Ice. He also sends Tyrion's inexperienced squire Podrick along with her. With Joffrey dead, his younger brother Tommen is crowned the new king, with Marjorie as his eager new queen-in-waiting.
When we marry, I become yours. Forever.
This is also where we meet Tommen's cat Sir Pounce, a key Season 4 character. Tyrion is put on trial, but he knows it's rigged against him.
You will not speak unless called upon.
So he goes with what worked for him last time.
I demand a trial by combat.
Oberyn Martell joins Team Tyrion.
I will be your champion.
With the Mountain representing the prosecution.
Who am I fighting?
Oberyn, also known as the Red Viper, initially has the upper hand. But the Mountain grabs him and smashes his head in his hands like a grape. The Mountain is horribly wounded in the fight, but Maester Qyburn believes he can be saved.
The process may change.
Out of options, Jaime breaks Tyrion out of prison and arranges with Lord Varys to sneak him onto a ship bound for Essos. But before he leaves, Tyrion goes to his father's bedroom and kills him on the John with a crossbow. Blunt, but to the point. Arya and the Hound manage to avoid any trouble back during the Red Wedding massacre at the Twins, so they head to the Vale, but are turned away after hearing about Lysa Arryn's death.
Lady Arryn died 3 days ago.
Brienne and Podrick run across both of them on the road.
You a knight?
No.
Which leads to a knockdown, drag-out fight between Brienne and the Hound over who wants to protect Arya more. The Hound is badly wounded and asks Arya to kill him, but she refuses. Arya then goes on the run and makes it to a port where she uses the iron coin that Jaqen H'ghar gave her to book passage across the sea to Braavos. Extremely far to the north, at the very top of the world, we get our first real look at the show's main undead nemesis, the Night King, able to turn innocent babies into White Walkers. A bit south of there, Bran and his group arrive at a tree he's seen in his visions, where they're attacked by whites. Jojen Reed is killed, but Bran, Mira, and Hodor manage to make it into a nearby cave where they are protected by ancient creatures known as the Children of the Forest. Bran meets the Three-Eyed Raven, who isn't Max von Sydow yet, but soon will be.
I've been watching you. All of you.
Just a bit south of there, Jon Snow returns to Castle Black, which is good because Mance Rayder's army stages a massive assault just as Jon warned them they would. Yeah, they have giants. It's the North. During the battle, Ygritte seems to get the drop on Jon, but she's killed by a boy named Ollie. Eventually, the Night's Watch is successful at holding the invasion off.
It's over.
But Mance's army is still pretty big and plans to come back.
We're not here to conquer. We're here to hide behind your wall.
That is until Stannis Baratheon shows up with a newly acquired army, courtesy of a loan from the Iron Bank of Braavos, who has switched their allegiance from the Lannisters to the real Baratheons. Stannis routs the wildling forces and takes Mance Rayder prisoner. Finally, far to the east, Daenerys and her armies arrive in the final slave city, Meereen. After liberating Meereen, Daenerys finds out just how difficult it is to keep the peace and prevent the return of slavery in 3 cities, so she agrees to delay her trip to Westeros.
It appears my liberation of Slaver's Bay isn't going quite as planned.
She also discovers that Ser Jorah Mormont had been serving as a Baratheon spy.
You betrayed me. From the first.
And banishes him from Meereen and all other slave cities for life. Ser Jorah is sad. Season 5 opens with a flashback showing a young Cersei and her friend visiting a witch in the woods near Casterly Rock.
Everyone wants to know their future.
till they know their future.
The witch tells her that one day she'll be queen and will have 3 children, but they will all die during her lifetime, and she'll be replaced by a younger and more beautiful queen. So she's got that going for her, which is nice. Jumping forward to the present, at least part of the prophecy comes true with the marriage of Tommen and Margaery. Cersei's been demoted to Queen Mother, but is still trying to run the capital herself and head off the increasingly powerful Tyrells. This includes forming an alliance with a religious group on the rise in King's Landing called the Sparrows and their leader, the High Sparrow.
The faith and the crown are the 2 pillars that hold up this world.
Initially, this works out pretty well for Cersei, as the High Sparrow has both Sir Loras and Margaery Tyrell arrested. But then Cersei loses control of the group and ends up arrested herself on charges including incest and the murder of King Robert. So it's pretty serious. As punishment, Cersei is forced to confess her sins and walk naked through the streets of King's Landing, while this lady yells shame at her. Shame! There is one bright spot though. When her walk is over, Qyburn introduces her to the newly resurrected Mountain, a silent 8-foot-tall zombie in gold armor who lives to do her bidding. Neat. Jaime Lannister's not around for any of this because he's off in Dorne.
I like to improvise.
After getting a threatening message from Oberyn's lover Ellaria, Jaime takes Bronn with him to rescue his daughter Myrcella. Don't forget, a few seasons ago, Tyrion sent Myrcella to Dorne to be married. Prince Doran of Dorne agrees to send Myrcella back to King's Landing.
If the alliance between the Iron Throne and Dorne is to continue, their engagement must stand.
As they leave for the return trip, however, Ellaria goes rogue and poisons Myrcella to death. That's 2 Baratheon child poisonings in a row. Across the sea, Arya arrives in Braavos to learn the ways of the many-faced god from Jaqen H'ghar and his lovely assistant. Jaqen tells her she has to become no one, and she pretends to know what that means.
Who are you then?
No one.
Eventually, Arya runs into her old enemy, Meryn Trant, the Kingsguard who killed her teacher, Syrio Forel, and starts crossing more names off her list. Meanwhile, Tyrion and Varys arrive overseas, and the former Master of Whispers convinces his new traveling companion to go meet with Daenerys.
I believe men of talent have a part to play in the war to come.
Tyrion eventually makes his way to Daenerys with Ser Jorah, who has kidnapped him as a peace offering. Daenerys agrees to take on Tyrion as an advisor, but once more sends Ser Jorah away. Tyrion is won over by Daenerys' plans to not just upend the way Westeros works, but break the system altogether.
I'm not going to stop the wheel. I'm going to break the wheel.
But things are falling apart in Meereen. The city's experiencing an uprising by former slavers calling themselves the Sons of the Harpy. Hoping to keep the peace, she agrees to reopen the fighting pits, gladiator-like arenas where men fight for sport. The Sons of the Harpy stage a revolt and begin slaughtering everyone. Daenerys is about to be killed when she's saved by Drogon, her biggest and, let's face it, favorite dragon, who flies away with her on his back. Ser Jorah Mormont, who keeps turning up like a bad penny, and New Daario go to look for her.
Dragon headed north. If we're going to find her, that's where we'll have to go.
While Tyrion stays behind to run things in Meereen. We, the viewer, see that she's eventually set down and then immediately taken prisoner by another group of Dothraki. Good job, Drogon. Way to help. Things are also going sideways in Westeros, where Littlefinger has arranged for Sansa to marry Ramsay Bolton, making her a powerful figure in the north.
Stop being a bystander, do you hear me? Stop running.
Ramsay is, of course, a horrible person and brutalizes his new wife while continuing to traumatize Theon/Reek. Eventually, both of them decide they've had enough and escape the castle together. At the Wall, Jon's elected the new Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, becoming the 998th man to hold the title, but who's counting? Among his first actions is to seek an alliance with the Wildlings, offering to give them land south of the Wall in exchange for help fighting the White Walkers.
Make peace to save your people.
This does not go over well with a lot of his brothers, who still think of the Free Folk as their enemy.
They've slaughtered villages. They've slaughtered our brothers.
Jon is also losing allies quickly as Sam leaves for Old Town with Gilly, where he's going to study to become a maester. Jon, Tormund, and some other brothers and wildlings travel north of the Wall to the wildling settlement at Hardhome in an attempt to keep a huge group of wildlings from becoming part of the Night King's army.
The White Walkers don't care. If a man's free folk or crow, we're all the same to them, meat for their army.
But while they're there, they're attacked by White Walkers and Whites. Jon discovers for himself that dragon glass and Valyrian steel can both take out White Walkers, but it's a rout nonetheless. The battle ends with Jon and some wildlings escaping, but the Night King resurrecting all of the dead to serve in his army, so it's kind of a mixed bag. Stannis plans to begin his conquest of Westeros by attacking the Boltons at Winterfell, but Ramsay gets the drop on him and burns most of his supplies and siege weapons. So Stannis does the only thing he can think of. He allows Melisandre to sacrifice his daughter, Shireen, to the Lord of Light. But whoops, Stannis' army is still decimated by the Boltons' forces. After his devastating loss, Brienne finds him and executes him to avenge the death of Renly.
I was there when he was murdered by a shadow with your face.
At least we're pretty sure that's what happened. It's off screen. But we do know that Davos and Melisandre survive and return to Castle Black, where Jon's brothers are so upset at his alliance with the wildlings, they stab him to death.
For the watch.
Yeah, even Ollie. This kid is a monster. Oh yeah, and there's no Bran this season. He's busy in a tree studying for his Raven midterms. Thankfully, Jon's not dead for too long. Season 6 opens with wildlings and brothers sympathetic to Jon putting down the insurgency and retaking control of Castle Black. Then Melisandre, who we find out actually looks hundreds of years old and uses magic to appear young and beautiful, prays to the Lord of Light and brings Jon back from the dead. Jon then hangs the traitors who led the revolt against him and leaves the Night's Watch,
My watch is ended.
having fulfilled his oath to serve until his death. Gotta love those technicalities. Meanwhile, Brienne and Podrick meet up with the freshly escaped Theon and Sansa. Theon takes off to return to his family in the Iron Islands.
They'll keep you safer than I ever could.
While the rest of them head for Castle Black, as Winterfell is still held by the Boltons. Well, to be specific, held by Ramsay Bolton, who's the new Lord Bolton after murdering his father, along with Dad's new wife and their baby boy. Ramsay is so evil, guys. Just really, really bad news. Reunited with his sister Sansa, Jon begins amassing an army to retake Winterfell, including many of the minor northern houses and this actual minor, Lyanna Mormont.
You don't just want my allegiance, you want my fighting men.
Littlefinger, who de facto controls the Eyrie due to his outsized influence on young Robin Arryn, offers the Knights of the Vale to help.
You said you would protect me.
And I will.
This isn't directly plot connected, but you should also know that Tormund kinda has a thing for Brienne. Okay, it's time for the so-called Battle of the Bastards. Ramsay kicks it off by killing a captive Rickon Stark with an arrow. Serpentine, kid. Always gotta run Serpentine. This causes Jon to make some possibly unwise tactical decisions. But just when all seems lost, Sansa, Littlefinger, and the Knights of the Vale show up, and they retake Winterfell. Sansa feeds Ramsay to his own dogs for revenge. Yeah, get him. Also of note, Davos discovers the truth about what happened to Princess Shireen.
I loved that girl like she was my own.
And demands that Jon allow him to execute Melisandre. Jon sends her away instead and tells her never to return to the north. Meanwhile, the other lords of the north pledge themselves to Jon Snow.
The king in the north.
Yeah, that's how you pledge yourself. North of the wall, we meet back up with Bran, who's been training to look into the past with the three-eyed raven, who's now in his final form as Max von Sydow. Bran sees a few important visions, including the creation of the first White Walker. I mean, listen, it was a different time, okay? People were less sensitive about turning humans into frost monsters. And in yet another vision, Bran sees the Night King, who becomes aware of his presence. This alerts the White Walkers to the location of the cave, which is then attacked by the Night King's army.
Hold the door!
Mira's instructions in the present to hold the door for her and Bran, combined with Bran's time-traveling warging powers, end up being the origin story for why Hodor compulsively repeats the phrase Hodor.
Hold the door! Hodor! Hodor!
But anyway, Hodor dies. Very sad. This is also where Max von Sydow and Summer the Direwolf meet their untimely ends. Or if you're a White Walker, their perfectly timed ends. Outside of the cave, Mira and Bran are about to be killed by Whites when they're saved by a disfigured Benjen Stark. Remember him from season 1? He takes Mira and Bran back toward the wall. And this is where Bran touches a weirwood tree and has yet another vision, but this is an important one. The true story behind Jon Snow. We see that Ned Stark discovered his sister Lyanna giving birth to a son by Rhaegar Targaryen before dying. Knowing that King Robert would kill this baby if he found it, Ned claims it as his own bastard child, naming him Jon Snow. So Jon is of noble blood. He's half Stark and half Targaryen, and I bet you didn't see that coming unless you were on the internet ever before this aired. Okay, let's head south for the odds and ends. By the time Theon returns to the Iron Islands,
He let you go.
his uncle Euron has also come back and killed his father Baelon. Euron is crowned the new king and vows to marry Daenerys Targaryen and use her dragons to claim control of Westeros.
I wasn't born to be king. I paid the iron price.
In the aftermath, Theon and Yara flee, but Euron vows to build a new fleet and go after them. Meanwhile, Sam, Gilly, and newborn baby Sam stop at the ancestral Tarly home on their way to the Citadel for Sam's maester training. And this isn't really important except to note that Sam's dad is a dick, and Sam steals the family's Valyrian steel sword, Heartsbane, as payback. Once they arrive in Old Town, dozens of white ravens are released, signaling the official start of the long winter. Across the sea, Daenerys is taken to Vaes Dothrak, where she immediately burns the entire Dothraki leadership alive. Daenerys declares herself the new leader of the Dothraki and heads home to Meereen, where she quickly puts down the revolt against her, just in time to receive a visit from the Greyjoy siblings.
Your ancestors defeated ours and took the Iron Islands. We ask you to give them back.
They provide her with a fleet of ships, which she graciously accepts and uses to set sail for Westeros. Before departing for her homeland, she also names Tyrion her Hand of the Queen. Meanwhile, Arya continues her Faceless Man training, which is like 98% stick fighting, but eventually her strong wills lead Jaqen to give his lovely assistant permission to kill her.
Shame. The girl had many gifts.
But the assistant loses and she's killed. Jaqen tells Arya that she's ready to join the Faceless Kids Club.
Finally, a girl is no one.
But she says she's tired of being no one and intends to go back to being Arya Stark of Winterfell. This news causes Jaqen to, I don't know, smirk kinda? It's not his face, he's still feeling it out. Back in Westeros, she gets her Red Wedding revenge, posing as a servant in the Frey household and feeding Walder Frey a pie containing his 2 sons, and then executing him. Also back in Westeros, we find out that the Hound is still alive, doing a lay-low TV Incredible Hulk kind of thing.
There's a reason you're still here.
Eventually, he teams up with Thoros of Myr and Beric Dondarrion and helps them execute some rogue members of the Brotherhood without banners. Meanwhile, back in King's Landing, Cersei has had it with both the High Sparrow and the Tyrells, so she and Qyburn do the natural thing and detonate wildfire under the Great Sept during Loras's trial. This explosion kills everyone inside, including the High Sparrow and every Tyrell not played by Dame Diana Rigg. While Cersei relishes her victory, Tommen, seeing that his queen is dead and his city is partially destroyed, commits suicide, and all of Cersei's children die, just as the witch foretold. I'm sorry, I've always just wanted to say just as the witch foretold. In the aftermath of the violence, Cersei is crowned the new queen. Oh, and over in Dorne, Ellaria Sand and the Red Viper's daughters, the Sand Snakes, assassinate Prince Doran and declare war. Freaking Dorne, am I right? Okay, here we are, the second to last season and the last season for this Cram It. We're almost at the end, and honestly, this is further into the story than George R.R. Martin ever made it, so give yourselves a hand. Arya is all set to go to King's Landing and kill Cersei, but when she finds out that her family has retaken Winterfell, she heads there instead. In the woods, she sees Nymeria, her old direwolf, but the animal's gone native and prefers running wild than living with the pack. You know, it's like a metaphor. In Old Town, Sam does a lot of reading and meets up with Jorah Mormont, who's now infected with a deadly disease called grayscale. Sam cures Jorah, and Jorah heads back to Daenerys to serve his queen. She takes him back because the guy just won't quit. Daenerys arrives in Westeros with her armies and her dragons and everybody else at Dragonstone, which is empty since Stannis Baratheon abandoned it for his failed campaign in the north. There, she's visited by Melisandre, who suggests a meeting with Jon Snow.
Let him stand before you and tell you the things that have happened to him.
Tyrion seconds the motion, so they extend an invitation. Jon Snow decides to go against Sansa's advice and leaves her in charge as Warden of the North in his stead. After he leaves, Mira and Bran make it back from their travels, but Bran has been changed seemingly forever by his powers and has emotionally disconnected almost completely.
I can never be lord of anything. I'm the three-eyed raven.
He barely even reacts when Mira tells him she's leaving to go back home.
You don't need me anymore.
No, I don't.
That's cold. I mean, obviously because it's the North, but it also lacks feeling. Around this time, Arya also returns to Winterfell and hugs everyone. Littlefinger's also hanging around the castle and generally being a creep. He tries to drive a wedge between Arya and Sansa for his own benefit.
What's the worst thing she could want? She could want me dead.
But it doesn't work. They turn the tables on him and put him on trial.
The conflict between the Starks and the Lannisters, it was you who started it. Do you deny it?
And Sansa finds him guilty.
Thank you for all your many lessons, Lord Baelish. I will never forget them.
Arya takes care of the execution herself with his own Valyrian steel dagger. The Stark Girls, coming this fall to ABC. Jon arrives at Dragonstone and is reunited with Tyrion Lannister, who he hasn't seen since they hung out at the Wall all the way back in season 1. Remember that? I just started talking. Crazy.
It's been a long road.
Melisandre says that she is now going to return to Volantis in the east, but she does predict that both she and Varys are destined to die in Westeros. You gotta wonder if that's gonna, pay off later on. Even though Jon struggles to convince Daenerys of the White Walker threat, she lets him start mining for dragon glass below the castle anyway.
You'd better get to work, Jon Snow.
He's also able to bond pretty easily with Drogon, who perhaps senses his Targaryen ancestor. You know what? No, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go to King's Landing, where the Lannisters are doing what they do best, paying their debts. Jaime Lannister, Randall Tarley, Sam's dad, the jerk, and Bronn lead a force that takes the Tyrell's castle, Highgarden. Olenna Tyrell is there, and Jaime allows her to drink poison for a quick, merciful death. Right before she goes, she confesses to him that it was her who ordered the hit on Joffrey.
Tell Cersei. I wanted to know it was me.
Cersei takes the news well.
She should have died screaming.
See, the Lannisters plan to use the money they're looting from the Tyrells to pay off their debts to the Iron Bank.
The Lannisters owe the Iron Bank quite a lot of money, but Lannisters always pay their debts.
Once those are taken care of, the bank will back the Lannisters in hiring the Golden Company, the largest mercenary force in the world, to retain their power. They get the loot, but lose most of their army because Daenerys, her dragons, and the Dothraki attack the Lannister forces on the road back from Highgarden. Both Bronn and Jaime survive the attack, somehow. Sam's dad and brother, Randall and Dickon Tarley, are captured by Daenerys and, after refusing to bend the knee, burned by her dragons. Tyrion's not crazy about this strategy.
Stop beheading entire
I'm not
families.
beheading anyone.
Speaking of Tyrion, he has Davos sneak him into King's Landing, hoping to make some kind of peace accord with Jaime.
You want Cersei to bend the knee, you can ask her yourself.
Ultimately, they're unsuccessful, but Davos does manage to find Gendry while he's there. Remember Gendry from that boat? He's back in an entirely different boat. Jaime tells Cersei that he met secretly with Tyrion and about the army of the dead, but she already knows all this.
Dead men, dragons, and dragon queens.
She also tells him that she's pregnant.
Who will you say is the father?
You.
Back at Dragonstone, Jon decides the only way to prove to everyone that the White Walkers are really for real, and he's super serial about this, is to go beyond the Wall, get a white, and bring it back to show everyone.
I'm the only one here who's fought them. I'm the only one here who knows them.
Going along for the ride are a renewed and invigorated Ser Jorah, forgiven his trespasses, plus Tormund and some other wildlings, Gendry, Thoros and Beric, and their new friend, the Hound. During the harsh journey, Thoros is mauled to death by an undead bear, but this Snow-a-Side squad does manage to bag itself a white. In doing so, they discover that killing a White Walker also destroys all of the whites serving them, which is good to know. They get pinned down and have Gendry run back to Eastwatch on his own for help.
You're the fastest. Go, now!
And I'm not sure how the timing works on this one, but Daenerys flies up with her dragons to save everyone. But the Night King manages to take out Viserion with an ice javelin. With some help from Benjen Stark, Jon and his group manage to get away, but Benjen sadly is killed in the fighting. Again, I guess, geez, this guy has more lives than a cat. Even worse, for humanity's sake, Viserion comes back to life as an undead ice dragon. That's gonna leave a mark. Daenerys, now fully convinced of the threat of the White Walkers, vows that she and Jon will destroy the Night King together. It's also pretty obvious to everyone watching that these two have feelings for one another, which is gonna be super weird in just a couple more minutes. Okay, almost through. So just about every living major character from the show thus far formally and officially meets up in King's Landing to talk about the White Walker situation. Tyrion reconnects with Bronn and Podrick.
It's good to see you again.
Yeah, you too.
Brienne in King's Landing at Sansa's request makes her peace with the Hound.
I was only trying to protect her.
And it's all very nice.
Pleasant surprise in an unpleasant situation.
until they show everybody the white. Euron just straight up freaks out and leaves immediately for the Iron Islands.
This is the only thing I've ever seen that terrifies me.
When Cersei finds out Jon has already declared for the Targaryens, she leaves the meeting.
The dead will come north first. Enjoy dealing with them. We will deal with whatever is left of you.
Tyrion tries to reason with her.
I will not hear it not from you. I will not hear it!
And figures out that she's pregnant, but once he leaves, Cersei reveals the full scope of her plans to Jaime. She's really in league with Euron, who's off with his fleet picking up the Golden Company. Once everyone else has exhausted themselves fighting the dead, she's going to use her forces to wipe out whoever's left and stay in power. Jaime thinks this is crazy and crazy dishonorable, so he takes off, leaving King's Landing just as the first snow begins to fall. Theon, remember Theon? Pledges his allegiance to Jon, then returns to the Iron Islands, fights this guy hard enough to prove himself, and raises an army to save his sister Yara from the clutches of his uncle Euron.
For Yara!
Daenerys and Jon set sail together for Winterfell and totally, get it on along the way. Tyrion gets wise to what they're up to and seems concerned. Or perturbed. He seems conturbed. And this may be why. Sam and Gilly have stumbled on some very telling clues about Jon's real identity and head to Winterfell. These clues and Bran's green sight are all our heroes need to put together the truth.
Jon isn't really my father's son.
Rhaegar Targaryen had his first marriage to Elia Martell annulled by the High Septon so that he could marry Lyanna Stark, making their baby, Jon Snow, a legitimate highborn lord named
Aegon Targaryen.
Which also makes Jon Daenerys' nephew. Ha! You've been throned. These two, they just got throned. And as if that's not enough, in the season's final scene, Eastwatch by the Sea is attacked by the Night King, riding an undead Viserion ice dragon. Together, they take out a big chunk of the wall as Beric Dondarrion and Tormund Giantsbane look on in horror, and the White Walkers begin to cross into Westeros. So that's pretty much everything you need to know from all 7 seasons of Game of Thrones in roughly the same time you'd need to watch one episode.
We've been here for some time.
And if we could get George R.R. Martin to work at this pace, maybe we wouldn't have to wonder if the show and the books are gonna end the same way.
Is it over?
Thanks for watching, and now our cram is ended. Or how about this? This cram was dark and full of terrors. All right, one more. A cramister always pays their debts? Okay, I'm clearly delirious, so it's time to go. See you next time.